There are peculiar situations where the tax elasticities are different from that lovely little 45-degree angle thing I showed you a minute ago. Suppose you have, on the upper left, a perfectly elastic supply of something. People want a certain return for producing the product, and if they don't get it, they're not going to produce very much of it. You have a demand curve, you put on the tax. Quantity is going to drop quite a bit. The entire tax is borne by the consumer. The producer refuses to take a lower price. Going down one, suppose the situation is reversed and the supply is completely inelastic. Think about the farmer's market 2 minutes before closing and he's still got 50 cantaloupes left. He'll give it away for virtually nothing because he can't save them till the next day. That supply is right there, and if you put a tax on it, he's going to lower the price to try and get rid of the supply, and the consumer will pay none of the tax. On the demand curve side, suppose the demand for a product is highly elastic and you put a tax on it, the quantity is going to fall. Suppose we tax mandarin oranges and not navel oranges. People are going to shift from the one to the other. There's a close substitute. They don't need to pay that tax. They're happy to switch to the other product. Suppose you've got two beer concessions at the National Stadium, and one tries to raise the price, and people simply walk 153 yards around the corner to go to the other one. You can't get away with it. Now, a perfectly inelastic demand, the meth addict, he's going to want that drug, and if he has to rob two houses instead of one to get it, he'll do so. If you put the tax on it, and assuming you paid the tax, which you wouldn't, but if assuming you did, you would find that he would simply have to swallow the tax. So we got these odd situations. Ramsey noted that, in theory, putting a tax on a factor or an item that's in either inelastic supply or demand won't cause the quantity to fall. So you haven't distorted economic output. If you can find something that doesn't get crushed under the weight of the tax, hit that with the tax. And if something else is going to flee or get destroyed by the tax, don't tax it. Otherwise, you're messing up economic production. Henry George came along and said, well, land can't move, land can't run away. Put the tax on the land, but not on the buildings. Because if you put the tax on the buildings, you might get a 3-story building instead of a 10-story building. But if you just put the tax on the land, you're okay. I grew up in Massachusetts. There was a cartoon strip called The Colonials. It was about Plymouth Rock and John Alden and Priscilla Alden and so on. And they had the preacher. And the preacher was sitting on Plymouth Rock. And he was crying out to God, they won't listen to me. Should I keep preaching? And he struck on that crazy hat with the, tilted sides and the buckle that was really on their shoes, but the people draw it on the cartoons on the hats. And he's struck by lightning. And he takes this as a positive sign from God that he should continue to preach. So he goes with his hat smoldering to Governor Bradford. And he's sitting in the governor's office, and he says, I have preached against sin. I have cajoled against sin. I have lectured the population against sin, but they will sin. And Governor Bradford said, then by Jove, we'll tax it. Not to stamp it out, but because he's found the perfectly inelastic tax base. The cartoon was written by a frustrated economist. And where can you impose the higher tax without crushing the development? Well, if you put a high tax on Manhattan, Kansas, you're not going to get much revenue. If you put a high tax in Manhattan, New York, you're going to find that people are still going to build there. Not as much as they would have if you didn't have the tax, but they're going to, the rents there, the need to be there is stronger.